So welcome to Women Together. I know that there are many of us still coming in the room, so I'll do a little bit of a longer welcoming. It would be great as everybody comes in if we just share a little hello and where we're coming from, as we're starting to do just now. Had a little sneeze there. But just welcoming everybody from all of our different places. I know that many of us come from across the United States and a few of us from around the world. We've had many in from Spain and Germany and South America. So welcome today from Maryland, Nevada, New York City, Norfolk, Virginia, New Jersey, Vermont, Connecticut, Wisconsin, Illinois, Austining, right down the street from where I am right now, Chicago, where it's snowing, Nyack, New York, Pennsylvania. Thank you, Terry. West Palm Beach, Florida, no rain yet. Well, it's I'm here in Cortland Manor, New York, so just north of New York City and just north of where the Eileen Fisher headquarters is in Irvington. And it's really just wonderful to be with all of you here today. We have been gathering like this. If you're just joining us for the first time, a warm welcome. We've been gathering this way for what feels like quite a long time, but has just been a few months. And before that, we were gathering in person and online with the Eileen Fisher Women Together events. So now we are continuing to just stay in touch with each other and to do what we call tiny practices. So Eileen Fisher has been creating clothing that allows us to feel comfortable and confident in our bodies. And the Women Together practices are the invitation to go a little bit beyond the clothes. And I was thinking about it the other day, and it's really, I always say, going beyond the clothes, and I'm like, what does that really mean? And it's this kind of inner freedom. It's this inner place within ourselves that we can come home to. And I have been practicing yoga, and I teach yoga, but I've been doing that for close to 2 decades. And in that experience, for me, it was finding home on the mat. And it's kind of finding a place where I can come back to myself and be centered. But then I realized that actually that's coming home to an inner place within myself. It's not just about coming to the mat or coming to a physical space or cushion for those of you who are strong meditators. It's really just about coming back to feeling at home in my own skin. So sometimes even in a conversation, later we'll go into breakouts and be able to connect with each other. And even in a conversation, how do I stay in myself and not just dive into another person's experience and sort of take them on? I feel like sometimes I just kind of want to crawl into other people's stories and understanding of who they are and where they're coming from, which is so powerful. We learn so much about ourselves and about our world through that. And how do I kind of hold myself in it? So today we're focusing on holding ourselves accountable, which will be a fun topic to go into. But just a really warm welcome to everybody for joining every week. If you're joining for the first time, it's just a joy to see everybody. And those of you who know Zoom well, as many of us do now, I like to go into the little gallery view. So I go into the it says view on my computer and then gallery, and I can see everybody and I can just say hello and see everybody's faces. And that always just gives me a little bit of joy to just see us really coming together. And we probably have just about 100 of us coming in right now, both on Zoom and on YouTube. So whichever way you want to experience this is up to you. And that's another thing that I'm just grateful for, just finding gratitude is a tiny practice for me, but just grateful that we all get to come together in our own ways and find each other. So wonderful. Perhaps we move into a little moment of stillness before I ramble on some more about holding ourselves accountable. And we go into the best part, which is getting to talk to one another. So as you know, probably by now, we have a little singing bowl that's typically in Eileen Fisher conference rooms. It says, "For conference room, please do not remove." But many of us, as you know, have moved out of the typical spaces that we are in the office, and this is normally in the conference rooms, and that's not necessarily something I see in a lot of corporate spaces, but it is in Eileen Fisher, and it's a place where we really just take a moment of pause and take a moment to kind of land in between meetings or in between running from one thing to the next. So the opportunity is to just take a deep breath and land here now together. Just let go of anything, just let go of everything, but anything that kind of held you back, or any kind of cynicism or any judgment, anything that it took to get here, to open this conversation, or Zoom room or YouTube. Just kind of just land here in the body. You can feel both feet on the ground if that's accessible for you. Just exhale everything out completely. We can inhale together. And exhale again. And just notice, rather than the breath moving in and out in a sort of horizontal gesture, just begin to notice the breath moving up and down, perhaps visualizing that along the spine, or inhaling into the feet and exhaling to the crown of the head. And you can just follow the breath up and down, just shifting the alignment. And I'll ring the sound of the bell to begin our moment of stillness, and I'll ring the sound of the bell to bring us back together. Thanks, everybody. I feel like I always say this, but I feel like I could stay in that space. It's just such a, once I go there, it's like, oh yeah, here I am with 100 plus women, just these little points of beautiful light all over, and just kind of holding each other and being together is just, that could be enough. So 8 minutes and we're done. No, just kidding. We have a full hour. I love Diane's face right now. No. So just recognizing that we're all here, we're in this together. And today our topic is around holding ourselves accountable. And I was watching something from Brene Brown. I've read some of her books and, just watched some of her talks. And she says, I'm a blamer. She says, I am a blamer. And I, go around and kind of something happens. She used an example of her husband. She dropped a cup of coffee in her own kitchen with no one around, and immediately she goes to blame her husband. And I just thought, yep, that's exactly it. You know, that's the micro moment of knowing, yep, that's what I do. I turn around and find a way to blame somebody else. And it's so interesting, you know, it's that kind of coffee dropping on the floor, or, you know, something just kind of casual in the house, or it's something, you know, much bigger than that. And I think, you know, we here in the United States, I'm just going to go there for a moment. It's already coming up in the chat. Here in the United States, we want to find a way to blame someone else for what's going on in our country. And I think there's a moment where we, you know, turn inward and say, how can I hold myself accountable? And I love already people saying, I voted yesterday. Here in New York, it's early voting, started on Saturday. And highly recommend everyone go out and vote. But just bringing that back to ourselves and our own growth, knowing that what's going on out there is going on out there. The only thing we can hold ourselves responsible for truly is for ourselves and our own action. So what I'd love just for a moment is just keeping all of that in mind. We can just type in the chat, what brought you here to this conversation about holding ourselves accountable? What brought you here to this Women Together conversation today? And it could be about holding ourselves accountable. It could be what brought you here to Women Together. I know I see many of you who I feel like we've been building this community for some time. So whatever brought you here today, we'd love to just see what's up for all of us today. What brought you here? You can type it in the chat, and you can type it in the comments in YouTube if that's where you are. So just to start bringing some of those comments in, we have Elaine saying, people say I'm too tough on myself. Pam, because the anger and blaming is too much for me. Pat, love being in this space and sharing. Marlene, enjoy connecting with women around the world. Jennifer, struggling with having goals and not being able to focus on them. My usual centering from Joe Carroll. Carol, trying repeatedly to stick to a healthier diet. Yeah, sometimes these things are just little micro things that can change our physical, our physical growth, our emotional growth. Meeting other authentic women who care to share. Lovely. First time, curious, and need some positive perspectives from other women. Glad you're here. I think it's Penny. Wonderful to have you. Paula, greetings from Manchester by the Sea. What's going on out there has been so distracting for me, working to bring myself back together to be productive and try to be optimistic. Jennifer, curious to know what this beautiful group is about. Elizabeth, I hold myself accountable so I can move on. Yes, beautiful. So many wonderful comments. Barbara, my need to forget about what's going on around me and work on myself for a change. Yeah. It's interesting when some of these pieces are coming up around forgetting what's going on out there, or, not focusing on it. And I see it as a lemniscate, the infinity symbol. It's kind of a going inwards so that I can go outwards, so that I can then reflect and learn something from out there and then bring that back inwards. So there's this constant learning cycle and growth cycle that I find myself experiencing. So I'm holding myself accountable for myself because that's all I can do. And then I go back out there and I learn something and I experience something and I'm like, oh, that happened, and then I can either choose to forget that happened, or I can choose to learn something from it. Like Brene with the coffee cup, she called her husband and she said, you left in a rush and this happened. And then, so that's why later I dropped my coffee cup, and then in that moment, he's like, okay, bye, hangs up, and we get to learn from those moments, and we get to say, okay, how did that interaction go? Was that me showing up as my best self? Was that how I wanted to show up? Is there another way? Um, yeah, so I just bring that in as a kind of visual that we can hold as we go out in the world and then we come back into ourselves. Um, and I love this from Angela. The word accountability really resonates with me right now because I feel like I just cannot get things done or want to like I used to. I want to look at my relationship with the word. And I just thank you for that, Angela, because there's an element of accountability that has within it this kind of need to be productive, this need to do something. And there's of course an element of that. And also that essence of accountability as a reflection tool, and as a sense of responsibility for our own growth, not just a responsibility for what I do and what I hold myself accountable to accomplish. So just, yeah, being with that. I love this. I love the chat so much. I love hearing just what everybody has to say, and what we're all bringing to this space. And Diane, I'm here to bring joy. Must remember to have that as part of my day. Thank you, Diane, for reminding us always. You're in the bottom corner of my chat, of my screen, so I love just saying hello, looking at you, Diane, but just having that element of joy, because even as we hold ourselves accountable, there's an element of finding gratitude in that. How wonderful that I can learn this thing, how wonderful that I can reflect and that I have the ability to do that. So having gratitude, bringing joy to it. And Francis, this is a positive space where we're all trying to do better. Sometimes when you hold yourselves accountable, it naturally eliminates others. I don't know exactly what eliminates others means, but when you hold yourselves accountable, maybe it brings others into it too. So thank you, Francis, always for sharing. So just noting where we all are and where, yeah, just noting that there are a lot of different places and spaces that we're sitting in and that we're coming from. And when we think about accountability, that it can be something about what we're accomplishing, what we're doing out there. It can also be something that is about our own capacity to reflect, and to grow. So, and something that I think about also is that there's an element of accountability that, what happens when we actually make a mistake. There's something that being able to say, oh, I made a mistake, or that's not what I wanted to have as the outcome. That wasn't my intention. So sitting with that, not just accountability of, oh, okay, that was nice, but having curiosity about that, having curiosity about what was I not seeing or holding, while I did that. So, there's a moment, right, when we talked about Brene Brown dropping her coffee cup. There's a moment where, yes, she went to go blame her husband. There's also a moment where, can I say, oh, I made a mistake. I dropped the coffee cup, and that's okay. And looking at that, what Brene says about that is she says accountability by definition is a vulnerable process. And I love that. It's actually a moment where we can be vulnerable and not be vulnerable in a way that makes us weak, but be vulnerable in a way that it allows us to grow from it. And Risa just said, I'm here to continue to build resilience. And that is exactly what we do every time we're vulnerable, every time we're holding ourselves accountable or saying, it's okay that I made that mistake, or getting curious about what was the actual cause of this thing, or how am I accountable to what's going on. And I think there's also an element of compassion in it. So if I were to think about it as somebody else, right? If I think about, let's say someone else dropped my coffee cup, do I get angry at them and say, you dropped my coffee cup? That was my favorite coffee cup. You dropped it. It's your fault. You're a terrible person. And that's really easy. That's a really easy place to go. I find that easy to say, easy to just rolls off the tongue, And yet there's also looking for the humanity in that person, looking for the reality of, did they mean to drop that coffee cup? Who knows? There's, perhaps they did. Perhaps they knew it was my favorite and they were looking to get me. I don't know. But it's also about recognizing that there is an element of humanity and compassion that we can have for everybody, seeing that humanity in it. And there's a really lovely Bell Hooks quote that I'll put in the chat, um, or maybe Karen will put in the chat. She says, "For me, forgiveness and compassion are always linked. How do we hold people accountable for wrongdoing and yet at the same time remain in touch with their humanity enough to believe in their capacity to be transformed?" I'll read it one more time. She says, "For me, forgiveness and compassion are always linked. How do we hold people accountable for wrongdoing and yet at the same time remain in touch with their humanity to believe in their capacity to be transformed?" And what I love about that is it's not denial. It's not saying it didn't happen. And it's also, so it's acknowledging and owning what actually happened, whether it was a mistake, whether it was something else. It was acknowledging the wrongdoing and remaining in touch with their humanity enough to believe in their capacity to be transformed. And that's where, if we turn that back on ourselves and we say, we have compassion for ourselves and say, okay, we're going for good, maybe not even going for perfect, but going for good, and we made a mistake. And that in that moment, I acknowledge that I did something wrong. I acknowledge that there was a wrongdoing here, whether I meant to or not. I acknowledge that there was a wrongdoing here. And I believe in my own humanity. I believe so much in my own humanity that I know that I have the capacity to transform. I know that I have the capacity to grow. And that, I think, is just such a beautiful thing. If we could hold that kind of compassion for ourselves and just sit with that compassion for knowing that we are responsible for all of our past selves, all of the who I was yesterday, yes. And at the same time, in this moment, there is immense possibility because every moment I have an opportunity to do it differently. So I sit with that and I invite us to sit with that for a few moments. And there's a beautiful practice that we've been using with the Presencing Institute. And it's around an open mind, an open heart, and an open will. So, really, an open mind is inviting in curiosity. An open heart is inviting in compassion. And an open will is inviting in courage. So, sitting with those pieces, I'll just invite us into a little, perhaps a meditation practice around those three pieces. Because in each of those, there's a question. For the curiosity piece, for the open mind, it's what am I not seeing? So, what am I not seeing that's happening around me? Or what am I not seeing that I did that may have been the wrongdoing? And what is it that I'm not feeling? So, when I drop into the heart space, what is it that I'm not feeling? And then where is it that I'm not acting? So, I'll invite us into those three questions with a little meditation practice. So, if you can find your comfortable seat for a moment, and I'll repeat those. We'll do some journaling about those as well. So we'll start with meditation just for a few moments, then we'll move into journaling. So if you have a pen and paper around, that'll be a great thing to go to next, and then we will converse with each other. So just landing back in the body, and if you can get both feet flat on the ground, that's a good place to start. Just rooting into the earth, remembering that the earth or this chair, wherever you are, it has something for you, can hold you, can support you in this moment. And just exhale everything out. And inhale, feeling the sense of connection to earth. Exhale, feeling a sense of connection to sky and the limitless possibility of being human. Just holding that groundedness and possibility at the same time. And as you stay with this moment of the breath, just focusing for a moment on a current reality. Maybe it's a challenge, maybe it's something that happened in the past, just something that you might want to focus on in this little practice. Maybe it was a wrongdoing that you were part of. Maybe it was something that you did to yourself. It could be very small, but just pick one thing. Maybe you didn't have breakfast this morning and you know that your body needs breakfast. It could be something very small, just to practice. You might want to pick something with a little grit, though. So just find that thing. And just for a moment in this, as you look at that situation or experience, just notice, what is it that I'm not seeing here? Where can I be curious? What is it that this situation actually has to show me? What am I not seeing? Last week we did a helicopter view, so just picking ourselves up and looking at ourselves from above. Just from that place, what am I not seeing? And then dropping into the heart space, dropping into a place of feeling, just noticing what's there. And there may not be exact words to it, but just noticing the feeling. Just acknowledging. Perhaps there's pain or sadness, perhaps there's joy or something else, but just noticing, what have I not been feeling? Where have I not been feeling? Just letting that feeling in for a moment. And then continuing to follow your own breath to the place just below your belly button. Oftentimes, when we have to make a decision, this is the place that gives us a solid yes or no. It's the intuitive spot where our courage actually lives. Just being with this place in our body, noticing, where is it that I have not been acting? Where is it that I have not taken action in my own life? Where maybe now that I'm seeing it or I'm feeling it, that I haven't acted on it. And just noticing whatever may be coming up for you and putting that down on the page so you can open your eyes and come back to your space and find a paper and a pen. Just jot down what's coming up for you. So the 3 questions, we can just put them in the chat for you as well. But what am I not seeing? What have I not been feeling? And where have I not been acting? Just to give a little example in case something didn't show up, I'll give the breakfast example just for a little lightness in our moment here. Is if I were talking about not giving myself breakfast, perhaps what am I not seeing? That I have hunger and that I, need to be nourishing my body rather than depriving it. Where am I not feeling really deeply? Maybe it's that I'm betraying myself and not giving my body the nourishment it needs. And where am I not acting is actually showing up for myself, getting up a little bit earlier and being present to make myself a nourishing meal. So those are just a few little examples to look at. In this situation, it might be quite different, but what have I not been seeing? What have I not been feeling? It might be what have I not been allowing myself to feel? And where am I not acting? So hopefully you've taken a moment to jot that down and connect with yourself a little bit. And maybe we do before we go into our breakouts, even though we want to take what we're learning into these breakouts and take the vulnerable moment in to have that conversation. Perhaps we also just do a little physical shakedown, just a little bit of shaking it out and just getting back in the body. So I'll just do the hands first because that's an easy one to see. And you can just shake for a few seconds, 5 seconds, 4, 3, 2, 1. You can shake your shoulders out if that feels comfortable. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And I'll invite the feet into this if you can. Some shaking out of the feet. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Shaking out the other 5, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. And just a little, maybe not shaking your head, but just giving yourself a little, that's a lot. And it can be a lot to bring up these kinds of things, and there's the body needs to discharge that. The body needs to kind of just, okay, that's there. And then I can keep working with it. Then I can keep going back to it. It's not a like, it's out here, it's gone, forget it. It's out here. Okay, push it out. And I'm going to keep working with it. And yes, Kathy, I will share some tips on breathing to feel the breath just below the belly button. For me, I've standing or finding a sense of uplift. So Wendy Palmer, we talk about this a lot. She says you can even put the hand on top of the head and just finding a sense of uplift. And then as I do that, I can place the other hand on the belly, just below the belly button. I don't even know if you can see it, but just below the belly button. And then breathing into that place, breathing into just below the belly button. And I can lift my hand and take it off my head, but keep my hands on my belly. And just feel into the belly, just below the belly button. And there's a beautiful story. I'll try and find the link to it from a friend, Martin Kalungu Banda, who talks about the man who I think wrote Invictus. I think that's the story, but he was with Nelson Mandela in a moment that Nelson Mandela heard some terrible news. And when he heard the terrible news, and it was about the passing of someone that was kind of a big part of his legacy, he stopped for a minute, and Martin calls this the gap. He stopped. I think it was 6 full minutes that he just completely stopped when he heard the news. And after that 6 minutes, you could kind of see him going in that way that we just kind of got uplifted and tall and sort of being really just with himself. And after those 6 minutes, he turned and he said, I need to address the nation. And immediately spoke to the country and spoke from that place of clarity and conviction about what was needed. So it's that invitation into the gap, the invitation into this space just below the belly button that that lives in our bodies, but also, you know, is something that we have access to all the time. So thanks for the question, Kathy. And without further ado, I'd like to send those of you in Zoom into breakouts to have this conversation further. Perhaps you want to share what came up in your journaling, what you're working with. Perhaps you want some conversation about connecting with others, and just an invitation to have compassion, the same compassion that we just invoked for ourselves here. Have compassion for each other and just hold enough space for everyone to share, and to really deeply listen to one another, recognizing that each one of us has so much power to bring to these conversations. And it is not too late to join a group. Even if you just came in, welcome. You are coming in for the best part, being able to connect with some of our new friends here at Women Together. So enjoy your time, and we'll see you back here in about 20 minutes. So enjoy your time together. And YouTube, thanks for being here. We'll see you in the conversation space, and back here, not next week, the week after.